Hey guys, welcome back to First and 10 over here on Clueless Gamers. I'm your host Pete, joined in a second as always by my co-host Brian. Guys, welcome back. We're here to talk more NFL football. This will be the week 5 kind of picks and then the week 4 discussion. And of course, we're recording this on Friday, so we have a Thursday night game of week 5 to talk about. And we had to do a little bit of homework on that one, Bri, because to start off the show, we understand this is an NFL football podcast. That's what you guys love, and you come here, watch every week, which we greatly appreciate. But man, we were not watching the Thursday night game last night, which is rare for us because playoff baseball was on. More specifically, Mets Brewers, game 3 of the wild card. We're not going to take a long time talking about it because this is not a baseball podcast. But the Mets win 4-2 in maybe the most improbable fashion. If you don't know, I was live streaming it on my friend Dylan's Twitch channel, Super Dprot. I'm sure many of you have heard of that. The video is still up there now if you want to go check it out. I did a whole watch along and reaction to the entire game. My voice is still a little shot, you guys could probably tell. I screamed a lot last night, and I don't know, it was one of the most amazing sports events I think I've had for myself, like right up there with like the Mets run in 2015 to the World Series or the Rams obviously winning a Super Bowl in 2021. That was amazing, and I still feel like I'm living in a dream. Bri, you also being a Mets fan, take us what you were thinking when that moment happens and Pete Alonso hits the go-ahead 3-run homer in the ninth inning.
Yeah, it's hard to really put it into words. I mean, I think you can see here my background is all
Every
Mets. I
week.
mean, you and I have both been living and dying with this team for years and years now. And I mean, that was as improbable a win
It
as
was
you're
insane.
ever going to see. I mean, to think they had two hits in this game going into the ninth inning, and you add in only one other base runner on a hit by pitch, you're going against an elite closer in that ninth inning, down 2-0 after you surrender back to back home runs a couple innings prior to Lindor, who's been the MVP of the team and up there among the MVPs of the league this year. Get that inning started with the walk. Great at bat. Nimmo follows two batters later, gets the base hit. And then Alonso comes to the plate. And this is a guy who we've been waiting for the big moment all season in
Yeah.
this walk year. And for him to deliver on the 3-1 pitch to the opposite field, 3-run homer off the bat, know for sure if it was going to get out, and then you just see it clear the wall, and it was shocking and just joyful all at once. And I mean, I had the scorebook out for this game as I do for typically some of the big events, so I was scoring it from start to finish. Not a lot to celebrate
No,
early, and
there
then the
was not.
4-run uprising, with of course the one big swing, and to get that win was just unbelievable game and results all the way around. So the Mets move on. Won't be easy, obviously. Next, you got the Phillies. They're arguably the best team in the league. So we know the kind of competition they're up against. But right now, this team is riding a wave. They have a magic about them. It feels like nothing is impossible with this team. And it's just been a joy to watch all season.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. I think that was really well said. I think it's fair to say we're both still riding the high from last night. I've watched clips of it all day long. I I really do feel like I'm living in a dream, like in a fairy tale. It was so storybook. That's what makes it not seem real. Like it just to have that guy in that moment when the team had done nothing up until that point, and where Pete Alonso had done nothing in the last like 3 weeks or so, going back into the regular season, and to have that moment with all the atmosphere and all the negativity that had been going around, and the Mets deservingly so in their history, they've earned a lot of that negativity. Man, that just felt like a weight off of certainly their shoulders and even all Mets fans across the world. Um, yeah, there's not more to say on that. This is a football podcast, of course, but we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about that because obviously, as Bryce said, you see his background, You know, if you've come around here, we've mentioned the Mets once or twice before. Just an incredible moment. An incredible moment. But guys, you come here for NFL football. So we'll switch to that. And the game that we had to do our homework on, because that Mets game was going on, was actually, Bry, an excellent Thursday night game, which is super rare to say, between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They went up to Atlanta to play the Atlanta Falcons, and the Atlanta Falcons win this one 36-30 in overtime on Thursday Night Football. An incredible game. Both quarterbacks, I would say, dealing, especially Kirk Cousins for the Atlanta Falcons, throws for over 500 yards, almost 60 passing attempts. He was incredible, and this Falcons offense finally looked, in its fifth game of the season, looked kind of like what we were promised, what we were advertised in the offseason when they had all these kind of Ferrari engines basically on offense, right? In Robinson and London, and they got Mooney and Pitts. They finally showed up, these guys. And Kirk was able to deal. They played well. Both teams played really well. And man, if it's going to be anything like this, even for the next couple of years between Baker and Kirk, including later this season, I am all for it. Brian, when you did your homework back on the game after probably this morning, what'd you think about this one?
Yeah, well, I had it on my laptop sort of in the background, so I kind of was glancing over, when I had time. And of course, the Met game ended, and we still had some of the fourth quarter, so I saw all that transpired at the end. It was a wild finish to
Crazy.
this game. I mean, you mentioned the crazy game by Cousins. I mean, that's a stat line that you see maybe once a year, and some years maybe not at all. I mean, to have 100 yards. So it's like, I think the Falcons offense finally got themselves in a groove after we were wondering,
Yeah.
where have they been for these first few games starting the Kirk Cousins era there in Atlanta. But early on, they got Kyle Pitts involved. It was nice to see him after he'd been a no-show basically the whole
He had no
season.
catches
Got him
last
involved
week.
on no catches, and so right away they get him for a big play down the field, and he winds up having a good game. I mean, Drake London just exploded with
Yeah,
12 catches. But you go toward the late stages of this game, and it felt like the Bucks had it wrapped up.
they
They
did.
have a
They did.
30-27 lead. Falcons have it deep in their own territory on a fourth and long, decide to go for it, which I
Weird.
didn't think they
Yeah,
would. I thought they
weird.
would punt, and Cousins ends up throwing a pick. So you think, okay, Levante David makes the play, right? The Bucks have it. They're in scoring range. This one's going to be wrapped up. Instead, they end up getting pushed out of field goal range, so they don't get to add to the lead. They have to punt the ball because the Falcons had all three of their timeouts. Atlanta, just by the skin of their teeth, is able to get field goal attempt off because Cousins, after a pass play to London, rushes to the line, gets the spike with 1 second left. I mean, it was
Great
amazing,
job.
the execution.
Great job.
So they had 1 second. They get Koo out there. He's been one of the best kickers in the league. Now, in this game, he had one blocked and he had one miss. So he was not at his sharpest, but in clutch time, he makes this one. I think it was like 47 yards or something. It was not a gimme. He made it,
50,
sent it to
52, because
overtime.
remember, it was 47. Then they got a delay of game, and it backed them up 5 yards.
That's right. Good call. And so that tied it. And then the overtime where they get the opening kickoff and go right down the field, cap it off with the touchdown on the catch and run for this Hodge, who I wasn't really too familiar with, to be
Yeah.
honest with you. But he races to the end zone. Falcons steal one. So yeah, I mean, this, you look at that division and there's three teams that look like they're kind of in the mix to take it. Division that we thought too much of going in, certainly
No.
not going into last year, and now you definitely got three teams that are competitive.
And heck, even right now, the Panthers with Andy Dalton, they're not a good team, but they're interesting. They're not like dead in the water like the first 2 weeks with Bryce Young. So all of a sudden in the NFC South's like, okay, there's something going here right now. There's a little bit cooking. It's very interesting. I mean, that sequence you mentioned, kind of the whole fourth quarter was wild, right? Let me just take you through what happened just in the fourth quarter. So the Falcons, they go down the field, 10 plays, 70 yards, touchdown. Then the Bucks come back, hit a field goal. McLaughlin, who's been great, 53-yard kick, good. The Falcons get the ball. This is where they got the field goal blocked. So they missed the one after, like you said, Koo missed a 40-something yarder earlier in the game. And then it looks like, all right, the Bucs are really going to salt this one away. And all of a sudden, Bucky Irving, he fumbles. So now he gives the ball back to the Falcons. And then, as you say, the aforementioned, as you said earlier, 4th and 15, the Falcons decide to go for it. Kirk throws a pick. It was going to be well short of the 6 anyway, even if it went to Mooney, which it looks like that was his intended receiver. That gets picked. Okay, game's over again. And then this is where the controversy comes in, right? This is what people were talking about, and it is a fair point. There was a holding call that ended up happening on Barton. I looked it up, his name, one of the guards on Tampa, because their line's a little bit banged up in some ways. He gets a holding call, but in the same play, you see that, I believe it was Bucky Irving, his whole helmet gets twisted around in a face mask. So technically, if they call that, it should have been offsetting penalties. The Bucs still stay in field goal range. The way McLaughlin has been kicking, maybe they hit a field goal, game over right there. It gives the Atlanta Falcons the new life. They do an excellent job coming down the field, and this is the sequence here that they scored the game-tying field goal. 9 plays, 51 yards in only a minute and 14 seconds. Kurt went to Pitts for 5 yards. He hits Mooney for 17. He then hits Ray McLeod for 13 yards, who fumbled out of bounds, so that got a little dicey. The whole fourth quarter was wild. Then Cousins with he throws there. Then Cousins he spikes it, comes up, hits London for 6 yards, goes over, hits McLeod again. There's an injury stoppage, so that stops it. Hits then London for 14 again. He was a little banged up, slow getting up. Kirk somehow gets everybody in the line, and with, as you said, 1 second, excellent execution. I'm looking at you, Dak Prescott. Gets the ball, spikes it. They're able to kick the field goal, and then it was just a bunch of tired guys in overtime. I didn't really know the Hodge guy either, but I think it was a case of he had fresh legs. He breaks that one tackle on the catch, and those Bucs defenders were exhausted. There's a lot of backups in there. That secondary has been hurt, and they had no chance, and he took it right to the house. Game over. It was a wacky, wild fourth quarter, a very entertaining game, and hey, when I was doing the homework this morning, I was glad to watch it.
Yeah, I mean, another takeaway from the Bucks side of things is like their defense. This was a defense optional game. I mean, right
Yeah.
from the start, the Falcons were moving the ball at will. Cousins by halftime had close to 300
Yeah.
yards passing. So, I mean, he just was slicing and dicing the entire evening long. By the way, it was a big night for the Falcons because you had Matt Ryan go into their Ring of Honor.
Yeah.
So he was
Which
there
really nice.
at halftime. So that was a nice little ceremony, and he got to see his team have a nice little come from behind win here. And they stay right in the mix as far as that division goes.
And they get to 3 wins. Everybody is 3-2 between them and the Bucs. We'll see what happens with the Saints this week. They have a really tough game that we'll talk about later. And then, the Panthers, they are at least entertaining. I thought it was a hell of a game. I'm glad that I ended up being on the side of Atlanta in my pick. You ended up taking Tampa Bay in this game, but hey, it was a coin flip game. Brian, I think we have to give it up for Kirk Cousins, right? This is a guy, primetime Kirk. He's a 1 o'clock Kirk. He kind of developed this reputation that he can't play in these big moments, but you look at his fourth quarter and overtime come from behind wins, he's up there in tops of the league, right? Like, this is a guy that has been consistently performing in primetime. We have seen it. He has, I feel like, dispelled that narrative, especially after last night's game. And in a season in the first month where we really haven't seen great quarterback play, even from some of our best quarterbacks in the league, like a Mahomes, like a Josh Allen or so, we have now seen Kirk go for 500 yards when most guys have not been at 300 this year. So I don't want to just pass over it. I understand the Bucs secondary is extremely injured. I get that. But that does deserve some recognition and praise.
Well, I just brought up Matt Ryan before, and watching him in a Falcons uniform, I almost sort of felt like maybe not quite as good as Ryan. I felt like maybe
Yeah.
a poor man's Matt Ryan could be a way to characterize Cousins. I mean, this is a guy who's had a good career, and Matt Ryan
Yeah.
did as well. I mean, I don't know that either is Hall of Fame caliber, but like Cousins, he's been playing his best football now in the later years of his career. There were some ups and downs
For sure.
earlier on in Washington, but I think he's kind of figured it out. We know he's certainly gotten his share of big contracts, which are the joke a lot of people. But yeah, this is a guy who deserves props for sure.
It just coming. Remember too, he's also coming off an Achilles injury, right? Like a fully blown Achilles injury. It's only the fifth game of the season. I think he deserves all the praise in the world right now. And hell, if the Atlanta Falcons can play like this, like they're supposed to play, they could be a force to be reckoned with, man. I mean, it was something to see. And hey, no shot at Baker and the Bucks. They played well. Evans consistent as always. Baker played pretty well, even though he got hit really bad at the end of the game there. I really like what they have too, and once they get more healthy, this division, hey, it might end up having two teams come out of the South come playoff time. Brian, let's wind the clocks back to a little bit of a painful moment for you that we'll briefly talk about. We're going to jump back to week 4, as we always do. We drop back to the previous week. And we'll jump back to, and I asked you if you wanted to do this, Broncos-Jets. The Broncos defeat the New York Jets 10-9 in a very rainy, wet, windy game up in MetLife on Sunday. But I don't want to just say weather was the problem. It was the excuse. Sure, it affected the game, but it affected both teams. I mean, in this game, Bo Nix, the rookie quarterback, goes 12 for 25 for 60 yards. At one point, Bry, and I never thought this was possible, going into halftime, he had 7 completions or something like that for -7 yards. That doesn't even make logical sense. And that is what the Jets ended up losing to. I feel like this loss, before I turn it over to you, is 100% on the offense and Aaron Rodgers. You could throw the coaching staff in there because I think they are a subpar coaching kind of tree with Hackett and Saleh. I've been saying that, but we all knew that. And if you didn't know that, even as a Jets fan, even if you were taking that copium, I think you're thinking it now as the heat has started under the seat of Robert Saleh. But Aaron Rodgers, he took a little bit of ownership after the game, saying, there's some throws out there that sucked, that were poor. This offense cannot go 9 points against a rookie quarterback at home in New Jersey and do that and lay an egg, especially with the games they have upcoming on their schedule. I mean, Brian, you're the Jets fan, man. I'll turn it over to you. What was your reaction after this one?
Yeah, well, I mean, my kind of expectations with this
Yes.
team are tempered compared to
Yes.
some fans, and I have not looked at this team and felt like Super Bowl or those kind of big things were in the offing for this season. So I mean, look, if they made the playoffs, I think it would be a very successful season. But
Yeah.
we got a long way to go. And so far, there have been some ups and there have been some downs. I mean, it's kind of what I've expected. Now, I definitely would have thought they would win this game. I mean, this was a game
Yeah, me too.
against a team inferior, that they would be able to handle their business. And instead, like you said, it was just a flat out egg from the offense. I mean, when I'm watching this game, I'm thinking they could have played 2 games, and I didn't think the Broncos were going to score the way that was going in the first half of that game. And then they, got it going a little bit. But I mean, when you have a quarterback throw for 60 yards, all of the net yards went to one player in Cortland Sutton. The rest of the Broncos had 0 yards combined among 6 other pass catchers. I mean, can you imagine a
It
stat
doesn't
like
even make
that?
any sense.
It doesn't. And when I'm watching this game, I'm watching Bo Nix. I'm thinking he's got an awkward motion throwing the football. I'm not sure if this is a guy that I'm really believing in, going forward. Now, I mean, I guess you could say he made the play he had to, the touchdown pass to Sutton. From the Jets' standpoint, right from the start, they just couldn't get anything going. I mean, there was no ground game to speak of whatsoever. In fact, it was embarrassing production what you got from Breece Hall, who went for 10 carries for 4 yards. I mean, I get it. The Broncos have a good defense. They do.
They do.
This was flat out unacceptable. I mean, across the board, the receivers to the running backs to Rodgers' play, it just didn't cut it. And it's not just a matter of, oh, if Greg Zerline made his last field goal, you escape with a win. No, there's deeper seated problems here with this offense. they could have a game like they did against the Patriots where it seemed like everything clicked and they looked like they were a Super Bowl caliber team. But I think what we learn now is that's what they did against a very inferior opponent in defense. And then you play a team that has competitive defense, and it was a no-show. You got to turn the page, but it's not going to be easy because we'll get to the picks later. But you're going against an undefeated team,
Yep.
and you got to go across the pond to London. So, am I feeling too good about that one? I'm not. This team has a long way to go to prove that they can consistently play with upper echelon teams. I mean, I don't think there's any question about it. And this game was very disappointing top to bottom because the defense showed out, especially early, but the offense just didn't hold up their weight. The coaching staff continues to share the blame, which I think is rightfully so. I mean, I've been kind of off Robert Saleh now for the last couple of years. Yeah, a lot of questions, more questions than answers with this team right now.
Yeah, I think you got a couple issues from the game, right? I think what kind of summed up the game was the shot of Rodgers putting the towel over his head on the bench. I think that really was like the key shot to look at from this game and might be a shot for the season if this goes south, which it could very quickly. I think the other thing to look at was and what you just said, right? Like, when they're playing these upper echelon teams, well, the Broncos are anything but. They're very mid. They're very average, and I think by the end of the season, they're going to be somewhere around the 7 wins category. That's what's so frustrating. To lose to this team and what's kind of this revenge game for Nat Hackett. You're at home, you score 9 points, and this is where I tried to caution Jet fans. I tried to caution people in fantasy, but of course, no one's going to listen to me because it's your team. Fans, short for fanatic, right? Like, that's how it works. Players like a Brees Hall, I think they were crowned too fast, right? Oh, this guy's one of the premier backs in the league. I'm like, this guy's not even rushed for 1,000 yards and has already had a major injury in his young career. Like, we have to pump the brakes on annulting guys and throwing them and putting them up into the stratosphere of right now really only guys like McCaffrey when he was healthy or a Henry or something like that. Like, Brees Hall is nowhere close to those guys. Could he be one day? Sure, but he's not that right now. Garrett Wilson is a good receiver. He's not the best receiver in the league. He's not even a top 5 receiver in the league. And then you top it all off that he's struggling with his chemistry with Rodgers, and that's on both of them. Maybe more on Rodgers because he missed a lot of the offseason workout programs. This is where those things play in. You have the offensive line already getting banged up. We knew they had a lack of weapons. I was saying that. And then, the defense has played well. They've definitely improved over the last couple weeks. But these are gimme games you need to have. And even if they had to win this game ugly in the weather, hell, even if it was 12-10, get out of there with a win. You need it. And to the best you can do, I think at the end of the game, what was Zerline's attempt? I think it was like 50-something yards, right? A 50-yard field goal. That's not good enough. Yeah. You have to get closer. In those conditions, he had missed a kick already. You have to get him closer and make that a more makeable kick. And it came up to bite the Jets. I mean, the last point I will say, you look at the stats for the game. The Jets, 248 yards to 186 for Denver. They obviously outpassed them 184-60. Denver outrushed them 126-64. But everything else is in favor of the Jets. They had more average yards per play. It's the same amount of turnovers. They had 5 sacks allowed. That was your highlight right there that I wanted to hit on. The Jets allowed 5 sacks to the Broncos 0. You can't let Rodgers get hit like that. And even the ones he didn't get sacked on, he was getting dinged a lot, Bride. There's a lot to come away from this game that are major red flags, and unfortunately flags that you and I saw coming.
Yeah, and I mean, Rogers this week in his media with Pat McAfee admitted that he was feeling bumps and bruises, not feeling 100%. I think did briefly pop up on the injury report, but he is going to be good to go for this game coming up. But and the guy is 40 years old, coming off a major injury. It wasn't going to be just a rosy picture all season for him. I mean, I certainly didn't expect it. We saw him at his very best in the Patriot game. I think he's going to have games where he looks really good, but he's also probably going to throw in a clunker every now and again too, and that
Yeah.
was certainly the case last time out.
Yeah, and I think the issue too, finally, the weird press conference miscommunication after the game, and this speaks to why I think Robert Saleh is a bad coach and he's just a bad leader, right? Like he was very overhyped in San Francisco. I was saying that because I watched all these games. They're some of those coaches that come out of there, out of the Kyle Shanahan tree, are products of Kyle Shanahan. But hell, D'Amico Ryans takes over for Saleh. He not only coaches the defense better, he goes to another team in Houston. They're way better than any, and I understand it's the Jets, but at some point you have to win. And you can't keep making excuses or relying on a 40-year-old quarterback. And to make a comment that, they said was misconstrued, but I listened to it, the whole answer, even Saleh hinting or giving a reference to Aaron Rodgers' cadence might have been the reason for all these false starts today in the game. Yeah, we might have to look at that, might have to change it. And then a reporter repeats that back to Rodgers, and he has a completely opposite opinion of that, as you would imagine, because he's an excellent job Rodgers does with the hard count, with drawing guys off sides, with getting the free play. Maybe the best quarterback that's ever done it. We even seen in garbage time in San Francisco, he did it earlier in game 1 this year. You don't take away that weapon. And I think that miscommunication, the guys, the weird hug they had a couple weeks ago where it was a non-hug. I don't think these guys like each other. I definitely don't think Rodgers likes Saleh. I'm telling you right now, and I told you this, and this is where I told Jet fans last year. I said, this is your ultimate fear. If this guy gets fired, Nat Hackett's your head coach. Just keep an eye out on that if this thing goes south in the next few weeks.
I don't think there's any doubt that there's a disconnect between quarterback and coach. I mean, it seems pretty
Yeah.
obvious when you watch the way they interact on the sidelines. The time, I think it was the Tennessee game when Rodgers gave him that kind of death stare on the sideline. It just something is amiss there. And when you got these things that are sort of simmering early in the season,
Yeah.
only are gonna go over the boiling point as the season goes along. So it's something that you got to watch.
Yeah, and then the hug thing that happened in the Patriots game, even when they were dominating, it's some weird stuff going on there, and it's a brutal loss. And hey, we'll talk about them more when we go over picks as they are across the pond, as you said, in England. Brian, a lot of boring games, a lot of nonsense blowouts that happened in week 4. So it was really hard to pick some games this week that we thought were meaningful to go over and not waste y'all's time here. But we are going to talk about one blowout because I think it's significant for now, and it's significant for playoff seeding down the line. And of course, I'm talking about the Sunday night game between the Baltimore Ravens and the Buffalo Bills. The Baltimore Ravens defeating the Bills 35-10 in a romper. They controlled this game from the get-go, starting with Derrick Henry's 87-yard touchdown run to open the game for the Ravens. It was a dominating performance. It is what we've been accustomed to this Ravens team doing. They have been a little up and down this season. They've been uneven. But when they actually remember who they are and they can impose their will and run the ball down a team's throat, that's what this team is, Bry. And then you allow Jackson to run and work off the play action, get some deep shots. That's what this team is. And on the other side, yeah, Buffalo, a lot of people were anointing them top of the league. I think you and I had questioned, hey, like, yeah, they're 3-0, but who have they played so far, right? I said the same thing about the Seattle Seahawks. Look at the strength of opponent, and this came to bite them in this one. They absolutely got dominated in a game that later on in the season, now Baltimore holds this head-to-head when we get to playoff seeding. What'd you think of this Sunday night game that ended up turning into a blowout rather quickly?
Yeah, it really was. I mean, I thought it had the chance to be at least a competitive game. I mean,
I
I
thought
think
so
both
too.
you and I were on the Ravens in this game,
I
but I
actually
mean,
had
right from
Buffalo in
the
this one.
you had Buffalo,
Yeah.
excuse me. So yeah, it obviously went the other way and quickly because I think the Bills had got the first possession and the Ravens get the ball, and Derrick Henry on the
Yeah.
first play was at 86 yards for the
87, yeah.
score. And that, believe it or not, was his third longest rushing
It's
touchdown of his
insane.
career because he's had two over 90 plus. I mean, they call him King Henry for a reason. And this guy has shown he clearly has plenty left in the tank. This game showed the Ravens are going to be at their most dangerous if they're going to get this kind of production, which they're not. I mean, you're not going to get 199 yards, but if you get the A performance from Henry, this team is going to be awfully tough to beat because there's no way to guard them. You gear up to stop Henry, and then like you said, Lamar does his thing. He takes off with his legs or throws the ball. Now he didn't even need to have a big
No.
passing night in this game. He only goes for a buck 56. Their leading receiver was the third down back, Justice Hill,
Yeah, how
with
about that?
6 catches, including a score. And I mean, one thing that's kind of a mystery to me with the Ravens is how Mark Andrews has
Yeah.
completely disappeared from the
Yeah,
offense.
I
I
don't know
mean,
what's happening.
not only does he not catch passes, he's not even on the field running routes.
No,
I mean, it's kind of puzzling.
it
But
is.
clearly, they didn't miss him in this game. I mean, he didn't have a single catch, and the Ravens scored 45 points in large part, as we said, to Henry. I mean, like I said, they're not going to be able to play at this level weeks, but when they get this kind of contributions from the ground game, I don't think there's any team that can beat them. It's just a matter of getting these kind of efforts consistently, and if they do that, look out, rest of the league.
It feels like the only team in their way when they play like this is the Chiefs, and the Chiefs are in everyone's way, right? Like the Chiefs kind of have their number, but we saw in the regular season they demolished San Francisco. Like another team that obviously made the Super Bowl that we consider in that upper echelon. Like they own teams, and it just especially this is why Lamar is something like 21-1 or some crazy stat against the NFC because when you don't see a player like this consistently, maybe you're seeing him once every 4 years, it's impossible to prepare for. You can watch all the game tape you want, it will never simulate what actually happens on the field. And this is why I like the Henry move. Everyone poo-pooing it in some circles. Oh, he's 30. It's a running back. No, he still has juice left, and this is the perfect guy for this offense. A bruising runner who has very sneaky top level speed, as we saw in the touchdown. This is the guy that you have to respect, and you add in Lamar. And then, hey, Andrews, it is weird, right? But he's there when you need him. Likely is a talented player. We saw that in week one. He's kind of disappeared since then. They do have Zay Flowers. I do like Justice Hill. They have Bateman. There are guys that might not be superstars, but they are guys that you know are going to contribute in moments that you need them. And I think I discounted them a little bit last year. I did not make that same mistake this year. This team has the strong pedigree. They are meant to be there. And man, it was something watching them blow out Buffalo by 25. And then on the other side, Bry, before we switch to our final game, you look at Buffalo, right? We talked about the strength of opponents in the first 3 games. Really, a bunch of nothing going on there, right? Playing a lot of bad teams. They were dominating against the Dolphins, who they've historically dominated since Josh has been there. He leaves in the third quarter there. The first week of the season, you play a tight nip and tuck game between the Cardinals, who we see are not really that good. You had a weak strength of schedule, and now you played Baltimore here. You're going to play Houston this week. You have no Khalil Shakir. He's been ruled out already going into the next game, and the injuries are starting to mount on a team that was already decently thin. I have to wonder, are we going to see that Buffalo ceiling by mid-October? Because it feels like they are at a point where they can absolutely bludgeon bad teams. But they play these solid teams. Okay, they're going to be neck and neck. And they play these top teams that they want to beat in the playoffs. They can't compete right now. I have to wonder how far the Bills can actually go this season.
Yeah, it's fair to wonder. It just goes to show how fast things can shift in this league, where
Yeah.
one week, we're singing the praises of a team, and then one week later, it's kind of a no-show, and suddenly the questions are out there. And it feels like you can ask questions about any of the 32 teams. I mean,
You really
heck,
could.
the Chiefs at 4-0, when we get to them, we're gonna poke holes in about 4 different things with that team.
I
So
know.
it's just it's such a topsy-turvy league. It's a league that the performance is not consistent one week to the
Yeah.
next. The Bills are just another case. I mean, yeah, it's what it's looking like now. Because after the first three games, when they're looking like the best team in the league, that, oh, it was just against bad teams because then they have a road game against a tough opponent and they don't show up. I mean, they don't get anything going offensively. Josh Allen had looked like he was playing the best football of his career,
Yeah.
and then he basically lays an egg in this one. So you really, that's the unpredictability of the league from one week to the next, and the Bills are just another example of that.
Brian, you look in this game, Josh Allen doesn't even have a bad game, right? Doesn't have a turnover. It's not he laid an egg, but it's not like he was the cause of his team losing. It's just the lack of weapons again coming up being an issue here. And what are you going to do? You're going to rely on James Cook and a rookie Keon Coleman. That is not the answer for this team. And it just doesn't seem like they have two tight ends in Knox and Kincaid. Kincaid that they spent their first round pick on. They don't seem to really use them in the offense, especially Knox since Kincaid got there. It's a very interesting situation that they're trying to form under Joe Brady in Buffalo, and I just don't think, especially against these upper level teams, it's sustainable.
Yeah, I mean this game definitely proved that. My last point on this game is think the upcoming game will be very telling for the Bills. You're going
Yeah.
against a good, maybe not great team, maybe not a team that's quite living up to the expectations. And the Texans, by the way, dealing with some injuries themselves. Joe Mixon remains out. That's a game that if they can go in there and get a road win, I think you and I both start feeling better about the Bills and their prospects going forward. If that turns into another loss, then it kind of feels like the Bills are exactly where they've been these last couple of years, where you've
Yeah.
been basically giving up on them midway through the season, and that's where they're going to end up again.
Yeah, and I should correct myself. When I said no turnovers, I mean no interceptions. Josh Allen, of course, lost a fumble. He did have that one turnover. But yeah, it's a big game coming up here. They're going into it even more injured than they did coming into the Ravens game, and my hopes are not high for the Buffalo Bills. But hey, they're still a good team. I still think they're going to win this division, but I don't count on them going that far for the playoffs. Brian, the final game to talk about here for week number 4, as I said, all of these were pretty boring, was a really entertaining game, even though one team was really playing from behind the whole game. And of course, I'm talking about the Monday night game, one of the Monday night games. The other one was pitiful. And the Detroit Lions and the Seattle Seahawks. Detroit coming into this one 2-1, Seattle 3-0. 42-29, the Lions get them in this game. Another offensive output from both quarterbacks in this one, particularly Geno Smith. An incredible game on both sides. Not a lot of defense going on. And the Seahawks played from behind most of the night. Probably should have got a 2-point conversion that for some reason was not overturned. And they said he was out, but his knee was in. That was a whole thing that was going on there. In this game, Geno Smith wheeling and dealing. They had him throwing a lot. He threw 56 times, 38 of 56 for 395, a touchdown and a pick. He was slinging it, even added 38 yards rushing as well. And on the other side, Jared Goff, only 18 passes, 18
Yep.
completions. He was perfect, and 18 completions for 292 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also caught a touchdown in this game. And then there was this crazy stat that came out. It was like all these big time fantasy players and receivers and tight ends, all 0 touchdowns so far this season. Jared Goff, 1. All ahead of these people. It's absolutely wild and a very entertaining game. Bry, the Lions knock off the Seahawks, give them their first loss of the season. Were you more impressed by the Seahawks in a loss in the way Geno played, or how Jared Goff and that Detroit offense looked?
Yeah, I think a little bit more to the Seattle side.
Okay.
I was impressed with this team. I felt like the first half they're kind of getting beat up. That's a game that looks like it's just not going to be one that's your day, and ultimately it didn't end up being night, but to rally in the second half and to have that kind of performance, I mean, when they had the ball, they were just moving it at will. It
Mm-hmm.
was like you were just expecting them to go right down the field, and that's what they were doing after not getting much running game in the first half. I mean, the Lions completely stifled them early, but then Kenneth Walker, boy, did he get loose a little bit.
Yeah.
That second half, he ends up going for 3 touchdowns. I mean, not a big
Only 12
yardage total,
carries.
only 12 carries, but a couple of those runs was like, this guy looks like an elite running back.
Yeah.
And remember, he had missed a couple of games too, so this was
No,
a
bleak
game
injury.
from him. And yeah, I was just impressed with the Seattle pass offense. I mean, for Geno to throw for that number, I mean, Metcalf, the guy is a beast. What can you say? I
He
mean,
is.
at size and speed, he can catch anything in his vicinity. I mean, he's really turned into one of the leading receivers in the game. Smith and Jigba is a fun player to watch too. A good route runner, sharp and precise with his routes. And Geno's starting to develop a rapport with him. And you got the old reliable Tyler
You
Lockett.
do.
So this offense can definitely make noise. I mean, it's definitely concerning that the defense was as putrid, I guess you could say, in this game because they didn't stop anything. I mean, they, for goodness sakes, didn't allow the quarterback to throw an incompletion, like you said with Goff. I think this is going to be a Seahawk team that will be in the mix. They have a coach who is a defensive minded coach, comes from Baltimore, and Mike McDonald, former coordinator there. They're not a very good defense right now. They're kind of short on talent, but I think having that defensive guru, that's something that will evolve as the season goes on. And if that does, with the offense they have, this is a team that I believe will be in the mix for a playoff spot.
Yeah, definitely not a good look for the Seattle defense there on Monday night. I mean, that's the thing is like Goff goes 18 for 18. That's bad enough. But only on 18 passes to throw for almost 300 yards. Obviously, you have to have a lot of long plays in there. You had the trick play where he caught the touchdown. You had the huge Jamison Williams run that ended up happening. I mean, just look at the stats, right? Williams is 2 for 80 yards and a touchdown. Tim Patrick is 2 for 52. Montgomery had a catch for 40 yards, right? Like, though these long stretch plays that they had going in the game, and it kind of it felt like Montgomery a little bit in the pass, a little bit in the run, and they kind of got back to who they were. Where Detroit was like, oh yeah, we're supposed to run the ball, and Gibbs had a nice night, 14 for 78 and 2 touchdowns. That is what this team's supposed to be, a kind of a thunder and lightning at running back. And then all these weapons were Goff when he has time, when the rush is not after him because they have to respect the run. That is where he can succeed, and we saw that. And he didn't even get the game ball, Dan Campbell said after the game, which Dan Campbell said that he felt bad about. But I thought this is what this Detroit Lions team could be. This is what I thought they could be when I picked them to be the number 1 seed this year in the NFC, and I think they still have the chance of doing that. They have an upper echelon physical team. Their defense is going to be their Achilles heel. There has to be improvements there, but this offense is loaded and electric, and they really haven't even gotten Sam Laporta going in any of these first 4 games. I'm very excited about what they could potentially be. And on the other side, yeah, for Seattle, I do think there is some question marks. I know a lot of people, including yourself, as you documented, you came across saying, oh, they were impressive. I saw a lot of people say that, but the 3 wins that they had were against garbage opponents with garbage quarterbacks. And in this one, they're basically trailing the entire game. Geno has to throw it 56 times, and the defense, under a defensive guru in McDonald, had a million holes in it. So I'm just not buying the Seahawks at this point. It just, they're a team that has to be wait and see for me. And I need to see them actually win and play quality opponents before I'm ready to anoint them as the top of the NFC West.
I could see that. And I mean, the Lions with their offense, they showed the creativity too, which I think when you get some of those trick plays, that kind of takes the offense to another level. And we talked about Goff making the touchdown catch, the recipient of
Nice
Amon
catch,
Ross
too.
St. Brown throwing it, and a good throw by him. So he shows he can, go into his bag of tricks a little bit because we know the kind of production he gives as a receiver and threw a beautiful ball there to Goff, who made a nice
He did.
catch. So that was a nice little trick play that they orchestrated to perfection. Remember, they had the hook and ladder too
Yep.
in the Arizona game,
Yep.
where I think it was St. Brown flipped it and they ran in. So this is a creative offense that can beat you in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, this is why Ben Johnson came back. That whole situation was weird, where he ended up coming back to the team and kind of declining a head coaching offer. But this is what he wanted to build. He wanted to be with this guys. They believed that they had something special. And hey, we're seeing little pieces of that week on week where they are building. They got that slow start in the Rams game. There was kind of a lull a little bit in the Bucks game. And now these last couple weeks we've been seeing in the Lions are certainly trending up, seeing what they could potentially be. But overall, a very entertaining game, way better than the other putrid Miami Tennessee Monday night game that went on. I mean, I saw a petition on Twitter that says they don't want either of these teams on primetime football for the entire rest of the season, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. I mean, that game ends up finishing up with, Tyler Huntley starting and finishing for the Dolphins, and Mason Rudolph coming in for the Titans when Will Levis got injured. It's a mess. Don't need to see either of those teams, but yeah, good game between the Seahawks and the Lions. Bri, let's do it, man. Let's get to our Week 5 picks. Of course, you had the Bucks for the Thursday game. I had the Falcons. That's where we are kicked off so far this week. Brian, we go across the pond at 9:30 to kick off the games here in week number 5 for Sunday. Vikings, Jets going across the pond to England. Going to be an interesting one. The first kind of game over their seas. Of course, the second international game of the season. We played the opening game of the season between the Packers and the Eagles in one of these international games over in Brazil. And Sam Darnold and the Vikings are 4-0, Bri. They've beaten the Texans. They've beaten the Niners. They just beat the Packers last week. And, of course, they beat your stadium mate over there in the New York Giants in week 1. And now going against your old quarterback I think it's in Wembley Stadium. No, they're actually playing in Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. So Tottenham is actually the stadium they're playing in. Your old quarterback, they are going to play, who was coming in with a team 4-0, didn't even think he was going to end up starting for the season. And then, of course, J.J. McCarthy went down. And now the Jets coming off of that dreadful loss that we talked about to the Broncos. Who do you got in this game, Bray?
I think this is a very, very difficult game for the Jets to win. I mean, I've been hearing that the Jets are better than they were last week. They'll be able to bounce back. I don't think people quite realize and appreciate just how good this Viking team was.
Yeah.
I thought they were going to stub their toe last week in a tough place to play in Lambeau. They blitzed the Packers in that game. I know Green Bay made it look better in the end, but that game was 28-0. They were steamrolling them. This team, top to bottom, has it going on right now, offense and defense. Just don't see this being a good matchup. And then you got the whole storyline with Darnold. He's going to take this one personally. I don't think there's any doubt about it. I don't think Darnold is happy about the way his tenure went with the Jets. I don't think there's any question. And now he's playing with as much confidence as he ever has. The team is playing top to bottom great in front of him. The defense supporting him well. I just think it's going to be a tough game across the way for the Jets. I think the Vikings are going to take it, and probably by more than a touchdown.
Wow, that is something coming from a Jets fan. I also have the Vikings in this one. I do think Darnold is too nice of a guy to say it. We've seen that in all the press conferences, questions over there this week, and saying, them literally asking, do you believe the Jets failed you? And he's like, oh, I could have done a lot of things different as well and played better. He's just too nice of a guy, but deep down, this is burning him inside. He wants to get back at this team, a team that did, in my opinion, fail him organizationally. And I don't know if it's going to be a blowout, but they're definitely going to win this one by at least a touchdown or more. Give me the Vikings in this one. The 1 o'clock games, Bryce, start with the Panthers and the Bears. And, the Panthers have been kind of fun the last couple weeks. They've, of course, added a win in there. And then Caleb Williams coming hot, fresh off a win at home against the Rams, where he was not fantastic, but he was good enough, 165 yards passing, to get through that game. They really seemed to find the rushing game in that one. DeAndre Swift having his first good game of the season here. I'm going to take the Bears at home. I know this defense has been a little bit underwhelming, but I believe there are more good players on that defense than what Carolina could offer on their offense. And at some point, Dalton I think is solid, but at some point, I don't think he's going to continue putting up the numbers he has in these 2 weeks. Probably an ugly game, but give me the Bears to win it.
I'm with you here. I mean, if this is a season where the Bears are going to do things that people believe, yourself included, this is a game that you got to win. You're at home against Carolina. I know they play better. They got to win, and then they, played decently in the game last week against Cincinnati. But you're at home. You got your running game going last week. DeAndre Swift had a huge game against your team, as you know. Caleb, probably the best game he's played. So I think there's a little bit of momentum there, and against an inferior opponent, I have to believe the Bears are going to take this one.
The Ravens go to Cincinnati. They're going to play the Bengals, a huge divisional game, a huge potential playoff implication game. The Ravens coming hot off of their win that we talked about against the Buffalo Bills, a dismantling of them on Sunday Night Football. And then coming into a game where the Bengals got their first win against those Panthers, but it wasn't easy playing Carolina last week. Carolina hung around in that game and had a chance at the end of the one. At the end of the game, the Bengals defense has been atrocious. It's been the worst defense in right up there in the league, and definitely the worst defense that Joe Burrow has had in his tenure in Cincinnati. This is a team, Bri, and a quarterback matchup where Lamar has edged out Joe Burrow 4 wins to 1 win. He is 4-1 against Joe Burrow in his career when both of them play. I'm sticking with the Ravens in this one, Bri. I think what they have to offer, the talent they have, where they can play the possession game, I think Burrow has been fantastic since week 1. He has not been the problem, but I don't think the Cincinnati team's going to be able to overcome Baltimore, especially when they're not going to have the ball. I won't be shocked if Cincinnati wins because they have to play with some desperation, but right now I'm riding high with the Ravens. Give me the Ravens.
I might surprise you here because the Ravens are my pick to win the Super Bowl, and certainly coming off the game last week, you think, okay, they made it now. They're ready to go on a big streak here. But I'm taking Cincinnati for this reason.
Wow, okay.
I feel like in this league right now, when you have a game like the Ravens did last week, it's very hard to have that consistency to the next
It
game.
is.
And now you're going on the road. It's a divisional matchup. These games are always flip of the coin. So you got the Ravens favored, rightfully so. I think they're the better team, but I just think they're not going to get that offense going at the same rate as they did last week. You got a Cincinnati team that, yes, there's issues on defense, but the offense has come around. That passing attack looks like it's playing at its peak again. T. Higgins getting back in the mix, making a bigger impact. Chase, we know what he can do, and Burrow looking really good. I think Cincinnati in a tight one pulls it out and kind of takes a little of the steam out of the Ravens and proves that they can't quite be top of the level week in and week out. And I think that's the story throughout the league.
Yeah, we the Bengals absolutely need it. That would drop both teams. Well, one would go up to 2-3, and the Ravens would drop to 2-3, and then all of a sudden the Steelers would still continually be sitting at the top of the division. It's been a very weird AFC North, and I'm really excited for that game. We'll have to see what happens. Bills Texans, as we talked about and hinted at a little bit earlier, huge game for both teams, particularly the Bills. They have to prove that they can beat a quality opponent, but Bry coming to this game even more injured, demoralized. Their top receiver in Shakir already out for this game. I think the Texans haven't played to that potential that I thought they could. They squeaked by a win last week against Jacksonville. I think the Texans are going to relatively control this game. Unless Josh Allen could put on a Superman cape, I don't know if he's going to be capable of, because I don't think anyone's going to come with him and be kind of a star alongside him. I think the Texans top to bottom are going to abuse this Buffalo defense. They're going to throw it with Nico Collins, with Diggs, in between the numbers. And I think they're going to win this one. Give me the Texans.
Interesting. We're going opposite sides again, back-to-back picks. I'm taking the Buffalo side of things. I think they get back to business here. I know they're going to be down one of their top weapons, but I feel like it's going to be a big bounce back from Josh Allen. He'll make use of the weapons that he does have, get James Cook going again. And the Texans, like you said, they haven't quite lived up to it. Even last week in a win, they're down in the second half against lowly Jacksonville. I mean, that's a game that you would have thought they would win by double digits easily. So I don't think they're quite there yet. I think this is a team that will make the playoffs, probably win its division. But the Bills, I still think, are solid. I think this is a spot where they bounce back after being embarrassed last week. I think you see a much better effort out of them to get the road win.
Colts go to the Jags, two teams that have definitely been disappointing, particularly the Jags, who are still searching for their first win. Looked like they could beat the Texans last week and came up short, had CJ Stroud come back down the field and have a game-winning drive against them. Honestly, a toss-up game. I mean, Anthony Richardson gets hurt last week. He has a hip injury. He's kind of questionable. Joe Flacco comes in, makes this offense look efficient. And if Joe Flacco is going to possibly start this game, I have no trust in what Jacksonville can do right now. I understand they're not going to go 0-17, but I think the Colts are going to win this game. I think it's going to be ugly, down and deep in Florida, but give me the Colts.
I'm saying break out the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm picking them to win. I feel like they're going to win one of these weeks. I actually thought you would pick them here because of your affinity to this
I'm
team,
going down.
seemingly for the last couple of years, but it seems you are fully out on them. I think if there's a spot to win, it's this game. It's a divisional game. Colts, not only Richardson, Jonathan Taylor
He's out.
ruled out. He's got the high ankle sprain. He will not go. Feel like the Jags, Trevor Lawrence played better last week. I don't think this is going to be a great game or great performance by Jacksonville by any stretch, but I think they pull this one out and get a win. I was a little surprised though. Doug Peterson, like he got the questions in his post game about his job security, and he acted like he was totally miffed by the
I
question. I
know.
mean, Doug, if you don't win a game, the questions are going to start coming. I mean, you've been in this league long enough. I know you're a
Right.
Super Bowl winner, but you're not immune, to you can't just lose every week and think you're keeping your job. So I mean, it's perfectly fair to bring it up when you start 0 and 4 and you've been
Yeah.
listless. I know your quarterback's play hasn't been good
It's been
and you can't
terrible.
control everything, but the questions are fair. I mean, if you don't start winning games, your status of your job is bound to come up. So I thought that was a little interesting. But I do think his team is going to get a win this week. They're now favored with all the Colts injuries, and I think they get it this week.
Yeah, I definitely could see it happening. I actually have to see it before I can start picking them. I need to see some kind of breakthrough. I mean, Lawrence, I think in his last 10 starts is 0 and 10, dating back to last year. It's just pitiful.
Yeah,
At
I've
one
heard.
point this season, he had a 53 completion percentage, Bry. I mean, that's pathetic. It's putrid. All the noise that Anthony Richardson gets, he's questionable in this game. I think if Joe Flacco ends up starting this game, I think the Colts are going to win. I just really think it's going to be like that. It's going to be a very, very ugly game in Jacksonville.
I feel like Joe Flacco, you could roll him off the couch at 60 years old and
It's
he'd
wild.
find his way out of the field and be able to throw the football. I mean, it just seems like nothing can stop this guy.
He's incredible, man. It really is. And this is a guy that the Miami Dolphins, they should have got him. He should be the backup for Tua right now, given Tua's injury history. Major miss on them and other teams around the league not getting this guy as your backup. The Dolphins and the Patriots in a game that I mean is going to be unwatchable. I mean, who's going to care about this game? At the moment, it's another situation where I'm taking New England until Miami can prove to me that they are not literally the worst offense in the league. Like statistically, since Tua has been out, they've been the worst in almost every single category offensively. They're scoring something like less than 8 points a game. It's something like 7.8 points a game. It's pathetic. And you would imagine Tyler Huntley's going to go again. Mike McDaniels has to get something going, but until he can prove it to me, I'm taking the more competent team, even though I don't have a lot of high regard for the Patriots. Give me them in this one.
Yeah, I'm with you here. I mean, the Dolphins, you can't pick them with that quarterback situation. It's gotten so dire that the questions have come up with the Dolphins actually entertain the
Yeah,
idea of trading Tyreek Hill. Now, it probably won't happen. Of course, the Chiefs came up, which I think that's absolutely a pipe
be
dream and not
crazy.
happening for the Chiefs. But right now, it's just been a miserable season for the Dolphins. I like New England to win. They made a change at running back. Ramondre Stevenson has lost a fumble in each game this year, so Antonio Gibson's going to get the starting nod there. They've had their moments where they've been competitive. I
Yeah.
think divisional game, it's going to be close, but I think the home team pulls it
This is
out
a
here.
game that you are going to put on in the background, and you will not see on Red Zone a lot this week. Browns go to the Commanders here, and Bry, the Browns are decimated. I mean, we know the stories of Deshaun Watson and how poorly he's played, but this offensive line decimated. The defense has injuries. Garrett is dealing with a recurring foot injury that he will need surgery in the offseason on. They've been a mess. Amari Cooper has been in the trade rumors. I think the dog pound is going to be selling and selling high come the trade deadline. And the way that Daniels has played for the Commanders has been nothing short of amazing. 81% completion percentage so far this season. That's like Madden. That's video game numbers. It doesn't even make any sense what's going on right now. I don't know how long Washington can ride this high, but their defense did look for the first time like an actual defense last week against Arizona. Give me the Commanders all the way. I think this is a double-digit game, and they're going to handle the Browns.
I agree. I mean, this is a case where you got teams completely on opposite ends of the spectrum. I mean, one, the vibes couldn't be better, the other, they couldn't be worse. And I think the Browns
Yeah.
ultimately have to make a decision about the quarterback and possibly, benching Deshaun
Yeah.
Watson because his play has been that bad. And last year, remember, their season was saved by the guy we just mentioned and Joe Flacco, who
Hmm.
stepped in, did an admirable job in that role, got the team to the playoffs. This team has a lot of talent on the roster. They're probably going to get Nick Chubb back in the coming weeks. He's back on the practice field, so there's at least hope. The quarterback is a real problem there, and for the Commanders, like you said, they're playing lights out. Jaden Daniels and his completion percentage over 80%. I think they continue their role here and win again. I mean, there's no way you can pick
It's wild.
Cleveland this game. It's got
No.
to be Washington.
And the problem with Watson too is we've talked about in earlier podcasts this season is like you really can't cut him really this season or next season. The cap hit is too great, so they're kind of stuck right now. And it just it's hard to believe that like you have to bench him at some point. You would think, but how could you? That's the issue that's going on there in Cleveland. The 4:05 games, Brian, kick off with the Las Vegas Raiders going to Denver, and the Raiders have done some interesting things this season. I think there is a reason to have a little bit of hope, but Max Crosby has been dinged up. The whole stuff with Devontae Adams, who's not going to play in this game, has been weird. And Pierce has made some interesting comments that we've talked about on other shows. And then you go to Denver, who's riding high off for 2 straight wins that they have right now, where they haven't had to do a whole lot offensively last week, and this defense has been playing out of their minds. I think Denver, in Denver, going to win this game. They'll handle a division opponent. Give me the Broncos.
This is one that, to be honest with you, I don't really know what to do with. It's kind of a tough game to
Yeah.
call. I mean, the Raiders, like you said, with the issues, they both teams obviously have their share of issues. I feel like it's a coin flip game. I'm gonna take the Raiders because they actually in this matchup have owned the Broncos. You go back the last 5 years, I think they've won every meeting. I mean, a lot of them have been close. Yeah, I mean, am I confident? No, especially with no Devontae Adams, and it looks like he's going to be traded. I mean, I would
Probably.
expect that's going to be the case, and I kind of don't think it'll be the Jets, but maybe we'll get to that another day. I'll take my chances with the Raiders in a close, kind of ugly game to pull it out like 16-13.
The 4:05 game, the final one, the Cardinals and the Niners, a divisional matchup. With the Cardinals have given the Niners some trouble over the last few years. Those games have been actually fairly entertaining, from high scoring to really low scoring games here. But the Niners, I know they're still banged up. The whole stuff with McCaffrey, who knows when he's coming back. But they have to get a win here. They got to get back over 500. And the Cardinals, after that Rams game, have been sputtering. They have not been the same team. I think the Niners, in a closer game that you think, are going to win this one, and this should be a fun divisional matchup to watch.
Yeah, I'm with you here. I'm taking the Niners. If I were picking against the spread, I'd probably take Arizona. So I think it'll be a closer game. You have to admire how the Niners have played on offense with the injuries
Yeah.
and the key players that have been out. Haven't really missed McCaffrey that much because Jordan Mason has been so good. I mean, you think about that story, an undrafted guy, and the kind of production he's brought to that backfield. You got Debo back healthy now. Eventually, you'll get something out of Ayuk. I mean, he's
Maybe.
struggled so far, but through it all, Brock Purdy has
He's
played
been great.
really well. He's taking care of football. He's really quieted a lot of the critics that he's had. So I think the Niners all here, but to an extent, I don't think it'll be a blowout game.
The 4:25 games kick off with the Packers visiting LA. And the last time that the Packers visited LA, the Rams won that game 29-27. And Aaron Rodgers was the quarterback for the Packers. Jared Goff was the quarterback for the Rams. So a little while ago, the Rams are decimated by injury. They have been a terrible red zone team, where last year they were a top, I think, 6 team in the league red zone wise. That has really been the Achilles heel. It was the Achilles heel last week in Chicago. Give me the Packers. I don't think this game is going to be particularly close. I know Jordan Love went through some bumps last week, but I think he'll be more comfortable coming into a full game this week, of back in action, of having a full week of total practice, back in the swing of things. And I think the Packers are going to probably dominate a very decimated, injured Rams team. Give me the Packers.
Yeah, I think I'm going to surprise you here. I'm
Don't
going
do it.
with your football to pull the upset. This is a team that it feels like when you've given up hope, it's like the Mets, right? We give up hope, and that's when they come through. They did it against the Niners, and the Packers have been kind of this weird team, right? Where when they've had Jordan Love, they're 0-2. With Malik Willis, they're 2-0.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, how about that? So it looks like it'll be Love this week. I think it's going to be a tight game, but I see the Rams at home with Stafford, given every ounce of what he has left in the win by another field goal, another upset win here for your team. I'm taking him.
God, we could really, really use that to save the season. The other 425 game is the Giants going to the Seahawks, and we've seen this game over the years be interesting. Remember, the Giants went up to Seattle a few years ago in a game they had no business winning, and they knocked off the Seahawks. I don't think that's going to be the case this time. I think the Seahawks against another inferior opponent, they're going to get back to their winning ways. They're going to play well there in the 12th man. And the Giants, last couple weeks, have really looked somewhat competent. I like what they did against Dallas. We know what they did in the win against the Browns, but going up against Seattle in that place, a difficult place to play, giving the Seahawks all the way.
Yeah, we're in agreement here. By the way, like a big loss for the Giants. Malik Neighbors exited that last game against the Cowboys with the concussion, and he is not going to go in this game. And I think he really single-handedly has what's kept this offense looking functional over the last couple weeks. So not having him, I think it's going to be a rough day for Daniel Jones, even against a defense that's not great, as we know.
Yeah.
But Seattle, a lot of firepower, as we documented on the offensive side. You're going across country, and that noise box, we know they've had their moments there, but I just feel like the Giants are going to be a bit overmatched here. I'm taking Seattle.
The Sunday night game is the Cowboys and the Steelers, and this is going to be an interesting one, but maybe not as interesting as it was going to be. Micah Parsons probably not playing in this game. We know DeMarcus Lawrence, a Lisfranc injury, worse than they thought it would be, out 4 to 8 weeks with that injury. This defense has been hurt by injury. Of course, Bland before the season also out. And then on the offensive side of the ball, we knew the problem was always going to be, well, you have CeeDee Lamb, and that's about it. I think the Cowboys are going to struggle. I know the Steelers do not score a bunch of points, but I'd say Justin Fields' best game, even in a loss last week, was that Colts game. And this defense for the Steelers is relatively healthy. I think TJ Watt and company are going to eat. Give me the Steelers in a tight one. I just don't believe enough in Dak having this team overcome all of these injuries, all of this deficit of talent, and I think the Steelers get a win here.
So we had a few disagreements earlier on, but lately we've been kind of in sync again. And we are with this pick. I mean, the Cowboys, as you documented, too beat up on the defensive side. We know the Steelers aren't world beaters on the offensive side of the ball, but they're going to be able to their way against a very undermanned unit on the Dallas side. So I just think it's going to be a tough day for the Cowboys all the way around. The Steelers at home, another tough environment to play on the road. Not going to put up a big point total, but the Cowboys, I just think it's going to be a big struggle for Dak and company going against TJ Watt and all that they have to offer. Steelers all the way.
The final game of Week 5, Bri, is Saints and the Chiefs. Of course, the Chiefs playing another primetime game against an NFC South opponent. The other Sunday night game where they played the Falcons. Now they come back on Monday and play the Saints. And all of a sudden, Bri, the Saints, everyone, a little riding high. We told people to temper their expectations a little bit in the first 2 weeks. Now the Saints have come back to earth, started off with that hot start 2-0, now 2-2, playing the defending champs. And now the Chiefs, look, they won last week. They gritted it out. This team knows how to win. But accidentally, Mahomes throws a pick and then takes out his best wide receiver. We're still waiting on Rashid Rice news. They fear he tore an ACL. We don't know if that's going to be the case. Either way, he is not going to be this game. Of course, Hollywood Brown, he's been out for the season. He's not played a single snap for this team. Pacheco, he's out for at least the next 7 weeks coming. He has a broken fibula. The Chiefs are more and more decimated offensively. I just wonder how many things you could take away from Mahomes before it catches up with him. But in this game, in Arrowhead, against a floundering Saints team, I think the Chiefs are going to find a way. And again, a very ugly game. Would not be surprised if it's 16-10 they win this game and they rely on that defense. Give me the Chiefs to win yet again.
So I thought long and hard about picking the Saints in this game because
That's
of all
fair.
the issues the Chiefs have on offense. I mean, I feel like some point it is going to catch up with them. They're at home. They just seem to find a way to pull these games out of the fire. I think it's going to be a very close game. I think they probably pull it out by a field goal. I'm taking the Chiefs, but you got to caution with all the problems on offense. And why is it taking so long to get a
It's
diagnosis on
weird,
Rashee
right?
Rice?
It's
Normally it's
so
like
weird.
next day. So it seems like something cryptic is going on there. Holmes, as we know, is not playing great. I mean, he's turning the ball over more than he usually does. He's not throwing the number of touchdown passes he usually does. So it's just not looking like a vintage Mahomes year, much like last year. We know he turned it on in the playoffs. They did get Kelsey going finally in the last game, so it looks like he at least is back. That's good. Kareem Hunt is now manning the
Yeah.
backfield with the issues they have there. It's like a turn back, 6 years ago. But I'm taking the Chiefs in a close one. I trust them to win. They just seem to be able to find a way with who they have to work with.
Yeah, it's wild. It speaks to the culture of Andy Reid and Brett Veach and Mahomes, of course, of what they're able to do. But I just wonder how long can they sustain it? I just think they can sustain it at least for one more week here against the Saints. But guys, that wraps up our picks here, all our talk here for week 5 picks, week 4 games that we recapped here over here on First and 10. We appreciate everyone being here. Of course, if you're watching to this point, we greatly appreciate you. Timestamps in the description along with our socials down below as always. And also, just wanted to say, when you see this, there is going to be some little technical difficulties as we go on. There's a lot of connection issues during the recording of this, so you're going to see a lot of jump cuts or maybe some freeze frame moments. This one was just a tough one to get through, so we please apologize for that. But our audio the whole time was great, so you'll still be able to hear actually what we're talking about, which is the main thing, of course, for our podcast and for our thoughts on the NFL season. Brian, before anything happens more on this call, quickly give some final thoughts here for the people this week.
Well, just quickly, a team that we didn't touch on because there's 4 teams on a bye this week, and one is the Philadelphia Eagles. And I gotta say, after their latest performance, if you want to call it that, Tampa last week, I think I'm out on Philly as a true Super Bowl contender. I think there's just too much working against them. And I have to give you credit because you saw it coming. I was willing to let last year be last year, turn the page to this year, new slate, new season. Same issues are festering. Something's not right in that locker room with that coaching staff and on to the players. Jalen Hurts is not playing well, and they just look like a team that not together, and I'm out on them as a Super Bowl contender.
Yeah, it's not good right now. It's ugly. I still picked them to win the division at about 10-7, but I didn't expect the Commanders to be the team that they are also being right now. I think at the end of the day, it's going to come between if the Cowboys could get healthy, the Eagles and the Commanders all in a mix there. It's going to be a really ugly division. And I'm thinking right now, just as I thought in the beginning of the season, only one team is coming out of the East right now. There's a lot of problems going on there. They've lost a lot of leadership, and I think they should have got rid of Sirianni after the end of last season, and now they are paying the price come this new season. Yeah, a lot to talk about here going forward. We are in full bye swing mode now. This is the first bye week of the season for all our teams, and hopefully next time we'll have some better connection issues to talk about these games more freely. But guys, we appreciate your thoughts down below. If you want to leave any comments, your picks, thoughts, all of that stuff, we greatly appreciate that. We read that stuff. We respond to that stuff sometimes. We always appreciate feedback and just general talk and commentary about the NFL because we love football here. That's why we keep doing this each and every week. And of course, as always, like the video, subscribe to the channel, share with your friends if you be so kind. And until next week of First and 10, thank you for watching.